So what are web-safe colors? Web-safe or browser-safe palettes, as they are also referred to, consist of 216 colors that display solid, non-dithered, and consistent colors on any computer monitor or web browser capable of displaying at least 8-bit 256 colors. The reason why this palette contains only 216 colors instead of the maximum 256 colors is that only 216 out of the basic 256 colors will display exactly the same on all computers. Why is this? This discrepancy is similar to something that once happened quite frequently but is becoming much less prevalent. And this was when Windows users opened a word processing document created on a Macintosh or vice versa and was confronted with a lot of odd characters in place of the expected punctuation marks and other extended characters. This happens with colors as well. So what might be a gray on a Windows monitor would display as a pale yellow on a Macintosh browser. In the same way that there are common characters and numbers that are consistent among computer platforms, there are also colors that display the same. These are what are called web-safe colors. Early computers had limited color ranges, and there were many reasons for these color limitations. The high cost of video RAM being the foremost. Most early video graphic cards had between 128 and 512 kilobytes of video RAM, or enough to display 16 to 256 colors. To display more colors, more RAM was needed. The 256 colors were determined by a mathematical formula rather than their aesthetic qualities. These colors needed to be described in no more than 8 bits of computer information, which by no coincidence is 256. The colors in this basic palette would display solid and not dithered on specific platforms monitors that were capable of displaying 256 colors. The palette of 256 colors contains the 216 we now call the web-safe palette, although in the days when the basic palette was devised, the web was not available for the public to use. And as I may have mentioned earlier, the major computer platform developers did not use all the same 256 colors. To give the appearance of more colors, and this is especially true of early monitors that could only display 16 pure colors, a process called dithering was used to give the impression of more colors. Using 16 4-bit or 256 8-bit colors, the applications generated geometric patterns like the ones shown here to give the appearance of more colors. Unfortunately, about the only thing dithering gives us is the appearance of what the Australians lovingly refer to as a dog's breakfast. Web-safe colors are defined in terms of RGB values of 0, 51, 102, 153, 204, and 255. These numbers might seem a bit random, but are in fact made up of multiples of 51. Let's look at this in Photoshop using the color picker. Here's 51 red, 51 green, and 51 blue, or 20%. Note the position of the color picker on the left side of the palette. Black here would be represented at the far left hand corner at the bottom, or red 0, green 0, blue 0. Here's red 102, green 102, and blue 102, or 40%. Notice that the arrow has moved up, and it'll move back across the picker again several times until it reaches red 153, green 153, blue 153, or 60%. Here's red 204, green 204, blue 204, or 80%. And now the last jump to white, which is red 255, green 255, and blue 255, or 100%. There is no 256. Before the software companies began including Netscape and Microsoft palettes in their applications, you needed to specify web-safe colors using the 6-value formula known as a hexadecimal code. You may have noticed it at the bottom of the color picker just now. There once was a Netscape color palette, and if you want to be compulsive, you can create your own palette of web-safe colors such as the Netscape palette. But here it is recreated for you because it no longer exists. Notice that the Netscape palette starts off with white, upper left, and ends with black, lower right. Microsoft could have used the same palette, but no, they had to do it their own way. Here the Microsoft palette starts with black and ends with white, the opposite direction used by Netscape. Are we surprised? Now to my eye, the Netscape palette is easier to use, as the colors appear to be arranged more logically. On the other hand, neither palette is ideal. Here's a palette organized into displays of 216 colors in terms of their color wheel. Black, white, and the 4 shades of gray, 20%, 40%, 60%, and 80%, including black, that naturally occur have been removed and given their own spot at the bottom. When should you use WebSafe colors? If you use a white background, for example, and your site has a red-brown background, you may see an annoying light-colored fringe around your image. This is especially true when you're using text. Using a WebSafe color, on the other hand, should produce a cleaner image. Use WebSafe colors for text, whether for HTML-generated text or for GIF images. The colors will map correctly and will not break up on color-challenged monitors, so will be easier to read. And finally, a word about another kind of dithering, one over which you do have some control. When you create a GIF image, you usually have the option to dither your colors. In Photoshop, simply go to File, Export, Save for Web, Legacy. This used to be under the Save area further up the main stem, as in Save, Save As, and then Save for Web and Devices, but they've moved it in recent versions of Photoshop. So once you open, you can see the various settings on the upper right-hand side of the dialog box. Now, lucky for us, the dithering methods used in creating GIF images are less intrusive. Dithering produces a smoother transition between colors and helps extend the 216 color range. This is good. On the other hand, dithering, because it creates a lot of new transitional pixels, creates a larger file size. This is not so good. You should use dithering if you have an image that contains a transition between colors. This example has no dithering and shows banding. The file size is 2.2 kilobytes. Adding dithering smooths the transition considerably, however the size of the file increases to 4.3 kilobytes. The GIF file format uses a proprietary compression scheme to keep the size of the file as small as possible. It was created by CompuServe and Unix in the early days when color displays were limited to 256 colors and modems were slow. Instead of describing one pixel at a time in terms of its colors, it describes the boundaries of an area and as a single color within that area. In cases where there are large areas of certain colors, such as with non-dithered images, the file size is smaller. When dithering is used, the larger shapes are broken into much smaller shapes, requiring more information to be stored in the file, and the file size increases. If you want to be on the safe side, you can export photographic images using WebSafe colors and dithering. But unfortunately, persons with color-challenged monitors usually have bandwidth-challenged modems as well. So when designing for the lowest common denominator, use color photographic images sparingly. A JPEG format will produce a better image at a greatly reduced file size, about 15 kilobytes at 20% compression. But again, our beleaguered visitor with a speed and color challenged computer is going to see an image more like the example here. Hopefully, with the passage of time, all computers and all device providers will eventually reach a point where this is no longer an issue. Bottom line is this: if you have to decide who your audience is and decide for them, if you are designing for the mass market, including persons with antiquated computer systems and slug-like modems, then better to be WebSafe than sorry. Picking WebSafe colors in Photoshop is very easy. First, here's an example of using the color picker in Photoshop. If you want to find out what is a safe range of colors to use on the web, you only need to click at the box in the lower left-hand corner. Photoshop automatically goes through the process of categorizing the colors that are safe for you to use. So long as you stay inside the horizontal and semicircular vertical bands, you should have a color that will work in nearly any application. But again, test, test, test. Next, we're going to look at what happens as you move through the spectrum a bit. Here I've picked a golden yellow color. We're going to see how different your range of options are from the previous red sampling. Notice how Photoshop has leveled out all the vertical bands. What this means is that there are actually less colors to choose from in this color than there were in the previous example. Remember me mentioning at the beginning of this the light gray and pale yellow when switching monitors and operating systems? This may account for that. By comparison, here's green. And this is what happens when you switch to web-safe colors. The range of colors is limited, but less so than in the previous example using yellow. This range is more like the red version, which is coincidentally its complement. And finally, here's a randomly selected blue. This is how the web-safe mode interprets it. Again, note the banding both horizontally and vertically. So as we go into the next assignment on generating our 24-step color wheel, remember this and make note of it as we are developing our own version. Though creating web-safe colors in our 24-step color wheel won't be necessary, I still want you to understand what web-safe colors are, as they are extremely important in the creation of web pages, images, and other graphics for the web.